Good evening, dear friends, and thank you for joining us to what it is this night at 8 p.m. on Thursday, our first live conference on Facebook in English. We hope you are okay. We hope it's comfortable for you. And we choose for this live conference of ours a topic we hope of interest to you regarding our older and newer regulations in Romanian forest. As always, we invite you to be together with us and to like, share, and comment the usual activities here on social media. Alongside me, as ever, my colleague and friend, Mihai Enescu. Good evening, Mihai. And how about this challenge that we're starting this evening? How about our first live conference in English?
Good evening, Marin. Good evening, friends. Yes, it's a quite wonderful challenge because we are trying to share the information related with Romanian forest also abroad for those who are interested to find out specific aspects regarding the forestry and the forest sector, let's say, starting from management and also to harvesting and several other things. In order to do this, in my opinion, in our opinion, it's proper to start with legislation, reason for which, starting from tonight, we invited one of my best friends, Andrei APЫN FânIAN, also my colleague from the faculty, who will give us a short overview about the regulations in the Romanian forest sector in the last century and something related with newest aspects regarding, for example, timber traceability and several other things. So, Andrei, thank you for joining us, and I give you the floor, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mihai, for the introduction. Yes, perhaps our viewers are asking why the presentation is in English instead of the Romanian language. It is because almost all the information from this presentation can be publicly found on different databases from the web, databases that doesn't require paid access. However, due to the fact that the information is in the Romanian language, and many of us have friends, some of them foresters from abroad, from different countries, I thought it would be interesting for them to have a glimpse on the main laws and regulations that were adopted starting from the 18th century. It is also interesting to have an overview on how state institutions from the past struggled to implement laws and regulations that led to a sustainable forest management in time. As you can see in this map from 1854, since centuries, regulations appeared at some point. They were related more to the damage that was done to somebody's property, and they were concentrated on sanctions, let's say fines for those times. So these were the main rules. Because resources were abundant and population numbers were low, they didn't thought about the impact that had clear cuts on a mountain and so on. For example, Lex Aguila, that was a Roman law issued in the 1st century before Christ, provided compensation to the owners of property that were injured by somebody's fault. This, protecting Roman citizens from some forms of, let's say, theft, vandalism, and destruction of property. For example, damage to the trees was sanctioned with 25 AS coins. That was the Roman currency at that time for each tree. So we can go a little bit, let's say, closer to us. As I was mentioning before, vast covers of forest land and few inhabitants resulted in the lack of forest regulations. This aspect changed when the pressure from human activities on the forest increased. As a matter of fact, at the beginning, the need to give these laws were solely for a practical reason, like the one given by the Ministry of State, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, that warned King Louis XIV that the ongoing extraction of wood from the French forest would threaten French warship construction. And this could lead to breaking the expansion of the empire, of course. His reform was gravitating on the idea of bon usage de la nature. Also the Germans, we can also mention a little bit on the Germans. Starting from 1550, first forest acts appeared in the approximately 350 territorial states that passed numerous forest laws and regulations, from forest management to timber market and wood consumption. Of course, for that time and for that period, we don't think that it was something very complicated, just simple rules for the 16th century. On the territory of today's Romania, the first regulation would appear in the 18th century. And from those that appeared, the most important regulations were given in Transylvania, Bukovina, and Moldova. And I will highlight a little bit the aspects from those times. In 1786, in Bukovina, appeared o rânduială de pădure pentru Bukovina in both Romanian and German language, containing 12 chapters. According to some authors, this is the oldest Romanian forest code. As, let's say, the most important regulation, it was that the forest owner must cut the same amount of wood that was that the forest gives in 1 year, in order to have a balance between growth and harvesting. Like in the case of French Ministry Colbert that I was mentioning before, people realize that if you cut without a plan, this will backfire. Also, for the first time, the notion of management plan is introduced in this regulation from 1786. The next one, from Moldova, was given by Voivod Alexandru Moruzi, who made a proclamation for forest that after 2 years, in 1794, was followed by a regulation for guarding forest areas due to the fact that forest loss in some areas was high. So same thing. First, they observed a phenomena, and then they tried to see the causes and, of course, to see how they can correct it. Of course, other instruction regulations were given throughout the years in the regions from the slide. But as I've mentioned before, we can consider these as the most important. So the most important that are here, the ones that are here are the most important. Also, in my presentation is just an overview of the laws. I will not go deeper in some aspects because I consider for our viewers it would be interesting to have, solely an overview of what happened during these during these years, these centuries. And of course, we just arrived at the time where the first forest code appeared. This is in 1881. So after the half of the 19th century, concerns regarding the development of specialized institutions and a better forest management system appeared. As a matter of fact, first attempt was made by Finance Minister Petre Mavrogheni. He presented a forest code project that fortunately was passed by the chamber, but unfortunately not by the Senate. Perhaps you are wondering why the finance minister proposed the project. It is because from 1871 to 1884, the Forest Service was under finance ministry. Then the second time came where a new project was given for a vote, and it was successful. It was adopted by the chamber on 16th of May, while the Senate voted the project on 9th of May. And then on 19th of June, it was promulgated. So the Forest Code was officially printed in the official gazette at that time. Also, I would like to mention that the finance minister in that period where the code was promulgated was Ice Brăteanu, a well-known figure in Romanian history. For almost 30 years, it will be applied by authorities, being the first law from the forest domain. And in this time, it will suffer 2 amendments made by laws from 4th of June, 1892 and 22nd of March, 1896. Like the penal and civil codes from 1864, who had the influence of the French codes, also the Forest Code had a French Forest Code model from 1827. Matter of fact, some articles had similar texts as in the French code from 1827. Also, this is, of course, my opinion, and for sure also the most important aspect of the code was the obligation of management plans before the harvesting took place. So we can clearly see that in those times, forest management plans appeared to have an importance, also in the legislation and also in the field. Then the plans were made by a special commission and were approved by royal decree. Today, the ministry is in charge of these approvals. However, due to the fact that almost all forest was in private hands, and the ministry didn't have enough personnel to do those management plans, small area of forest was actually submitted or researched with this forest management plan. However, this was the first one, and this led to a development in time, also in legislation regarding these aspects. We are going a little bit in time, in 1910, and on 9th of April 1910, the new Forest Code revokes the one from 24th of June 1881, with the intention to solve some actions that were difficult to achieve, like the obligation for forest management plans for all surfaces. We can notice that this one has 92 articles. So it increased for 46 to 92. First article of the code stipulates that the type of forests that are subject to forest regime, and those are state forest, church forest, private forest from those times. But also forests that have the function of protection, those who prevent floods, landslides, erosion, forests that protect communication routes like railways, public roads, forests that protect riverbanks and the quality of water. Also, because of the constant wars that were in the past and those who will come in the future, forests that protect the defense of the country, so those near borderlines, those near cities, had a great importance in this forest code. If we go to the second article, it describes the conservation of forests, mainly the forest management plan. And chapter 6, it's quite important because it established the guarding and forestry police. So this regulation empowers forest agents and state personnel to guard the forest. Strict rules to be eligible to obtain the job. And an oath was necessary in front of the minister or general secretary or tribunal president. So even in that time, qualified personnel was in charge in doing or in applying the regulation for the forest regimes. Also, for the first time, in chapter 6, felonies, penalties, and sanctions are described, while forest agents are obliged to ascertain the crimes made in the forest they guard. And as you can see also on the slide, guarding and forestry police was stipulated from Article 55 to 58, while felonies, penalties, and sanctions from Article 59 to 76. Then the year of 1918 came, where the unification began. So after the formation of Great Romania in 1918, it took a period of time in order that the forest code from 1910 will be applied in all regions. So 3 years later, in 1921, it was applied in Bessarabia, and in Transylvania and Bukovina, it was adopted in 1923. In consequence, the Forest Code abrogated the following laws. So the Hungarian Forest Law, number 31 from 1879 in Transylvania and Bukovina, Austrian Law for Communal Forest from 1897, Austrian Law for Composite Forest from the same year, also Austrian Forest for forest outside the forest regime, and the Russian Forest Law from 1776 in Bukovina. So some parts of legislation from the former empires applied, but afterwards they were abrogated by the code. Okay, and then, of course, all provinces were forming Great Romania, and due to this, new regulation, new laws, new orders had to be given for a better unity. So on this slide, I would like to underline the main laws that were given in the field of forestry between 1919 and until the communist regime took power. Indeed, for those times, it was quite difficult to initiate forest laws that will proper function due to two main reasons. First, the influence from the laws in the territory before unification. And second, because the forest type was different from the north of the country to the south, from the west to the east. So from 1920 to 1930s, different laws were passed, mainly for forest organization. And I will mention only the one from 1930s, where the first law was for forest administration, implemented by Directorate of the Autonomous House of State Forest and Directorate of Forest Regime. It was a control organism like today's Forest Guard. And then another law was passed in the same year, stipulating the remediation of soil degradation, afforestation, and torrent correction. So as we can see, the lawmakers, the institutions started to see the effects of soil erosion and other factors. And of course, they try to remediate these aspects. Also, there is another couple of laws that were developed before the war, and of course also after the war. An office for sawn timber evidence was formed, and it was coordinating the sales of the 15 big forest companies spread it all over the country, because exports were, let's say, having an importance role of the GDP or for those times. Then after the war, law number 204 was initiated for the defense protection, where Article 1 stated that forest surfaces greater than 2,000 square meters are considered forests. Of course, I would like also to emphasize some facts and figures from the great unification. In 1918, the forest surface increased with 133%. Yeah, this was clear because also Transylvania was in Great Romania, and of course other regions. Of course, during Second World War, due to the war, a lot of areas were extensive harvested for those times. And as everybody knows, after the Second World War, we had to pay these war compensations. And of course, the forest had to suffer again. So because of this, because of the wars, but then again, because some parts of Romania were given, then the forest area decreased, yeah, after the Second World War. In that time, from 1918 and 1943, 370 normative acts were given, 85 laws and decree law, 25 regulations, and 261 acts in Journal of Ministry Councils. I would like to emphasize the negative part, because when you have a greater number of acts, sometimes you cannot implement them as mentioned in those acts. But the positive part was that they constantly updated the forest law in numerous directions, as I was mentioning before. If we go a little bit, let's say, closer to our time, in the year of 1962, the first code appeared under the ideology of that time, of the communist regime, and stated that all forest was into state control. This led to a unitary way of forest administrations. It had only 51 articles, so with 41 less than the previous forest code. And then, of course, article number 1 states that forest and land cover with forest are all state-owned. Of course, there is also a paragraph in Article 7 that describes the protection and production and special protection function of the forest. So it had some positive effects in this regard, as we will see with these groups. During that time, numerous laws were passed. For example, Decree number 201 from May 1953 stated that all wood materials transported on roads, railways, or water must have transport documents or sales documents, and those were a printed standard form. Today, we will see at the end, we renounce on the, let's say, paper printed sheet of paper, and we went online, so to say it. And then also a great importance has the decision number 114 from 1954, where for the first time the forest surface is split into two groups. The first group consists of forests with particularly protection role, while the second group consists of forests with production and protection function. For sure, for the specialists, these words resembles even today with what we have in the legislation. And if we go deeper, the first group divides in 5 areas. So the first one is the forest with the protection function for water. The second area is forest with protection function for erosion protection. The third one is the forest with protection function against climate factors. The fourth one is the forest with protection function for society. And the last one is the forest that is having nature monuments and reservations. I would like to underline that even for today's standards, the classification from 1954 was ahead of its time. And these aspects were included in the 1962 Forest Code at Article 7. Then, after the 70s, we have law number 9 regarding environmental protection that states that this is a state problem. So environmental is a state problem of national interest. And it covers sections regarding air protection, of course, water protection, soil, subsoil protection. And the last law, let's say from this slide, is law number 2 from 1987 regarding conservation, protection, and development of forests, rational economic harvesting, and maintaining ecological basis. So in one forest, a lot of aspects are, let's say, implemented from the harvesting side to the protection one. Nowadays, they are a little bit splitted. they go in different direction, but at the time they put all of them in one law. So a lot of objectives, so to say. Also, as before, in the first codes, fines were stipulated and harvesting instruction was clear, in order that the forest fund will not suffer from those activities. Now we go to the first code after 1989. And this code, let's say, faced the realities of land restitution that started after the year of 1991. And if the code from 1962 had to deal with all forests under state ownership, now this code had to adapt its content to the different ownership categories of forest lands after 1989. Also, first private FMUs appeared with the year of 1999-2000. And also, harvesting activities started to be done also by private companies. Again, the definition of forest fund is introduced in the forest code. And for the first time, it is stipulated that payments for owners for protection forest are mandatory. And we will see that this paragraph also is present, let's say, in the actual code from 2008. So this would be, let's say, those years where, as I said, the ownership regime was in a constant change, and free market appeared in Romania. Then one more aspect that I forgot to mention is that in the Forest Code from 1996, Conservation and Regeneration Fund for Romsilva was created, and the money were used for acquisition of new forest land, afforestation of empty terrains, degraded, and so on. And then in 1998, first modifications appeared to the code by the government decree 96 in order to harmonize all the changes in the legislation that had passed after the fall of the communist regime. So a lot to mention, but also one important aspect was that the destruction, degradation, or damaging forest areas by owners or other persons, including arson, constitutes forest crime. So, as we will see also in the next code, everything is quite good regulated for those who are doing, let's say, felonies or crimes against the forest fund. So, March 2018, law number 46 was adopted. The same definition for the forest fund as in the code before. Now, also owners besides Romsilva are obliged to constitute conservation and regeneration funds. Forest management plans were not mandatory for surfaces less than 10 hectares. And of course, maximum volume harvested per year cannot exceed annual increment. So as I said, this was also mentioned 100 years ago, and it's made after also a lot of research, I would say, nowadays. And of course, clear cuts are on maximum 3 hectares, as it is also today. And then the same thing about protection areas was mentioned, that restriction imposed to forest owners through forest management plans by national parks, natural parks, Natura 2000 sites are made according to the will of the owner or by paying yearly compensations. So I think today, let's say the term is payment for ecosystem services. If we want to, and of course, this PES, payment for ecosystem services, is all over Europe. I think Mihai knows better about what's happening also in other countries regarding compensations. Okay, so another aspect, because a lot of people are wondering or asking themselves if we have strict laws regarding illegal logging in the forest code, in other laws. So I would like to mention that for those that are interested, they can search this or they can find this at articles 106, 107, 108, 109, and 110. So this is the place in the forest code for those ones. So I will elaborate a little bit, or I will make a further detail of these articles. Also, we can, if we look in the penal code, the law 296 from 2009, we can see also there two, let's say, felonies, that forgery and usage of marking devices is under criminal law. So who is doing, let's say, illegal use of the marking devices or is cloning them and so on. And then also for contravention, we have law number 171 from 2010, where it mentioned in detail what are the contravention. And of course, this law is used by the police, the gendarmerie, and forest guards, so control institutions. And I will just mention a little bit on the, just a second, on the articles from the forest code. So the first one is Article 106, and it's about reduction of National Forest Fund surface and change in destination. The material object of the felony is Article 1, Paragraph 2 from the Forest Code. The subject of the felony are private or legal entities in form of co-authorship, instigation, and complicity. And the material element of the felony is breach of stipulation from Article 36 and 37 from the Forest Code regarding the reduction of the surface, of the forest surface. Then we have Article 107 that stipulates the cutting, breaking, damaging, and pulling out from soil of trees, seedlings from National Forest Fund. In this case, the material object of the felony is the forest generation from National Forest Fund or outside it. And the subjects of the felony can be the owner or any other person or entity. And it is a contravention if the value of prejudice is not more than 5 times the average price of a standing cubic meter for that time. Regarding the next one, grazing in the forest fund. These measures were imposed to prevent damage of forest vegetation and, of course, soil compactions by the animals who are grazing in the forest. This will, of course, affect regeneration. And as we know, if a forest is compacted, then the seeds cannot, let's say, enter the soil and germinate. And the author of the felony is the keeper of the animals. The owner is cleared of responsibility, but in the case the owner forces the keeper, then it is co-authorship in this felony. Of course, in certain conditions, forest administration can approve grazing and passing through forest land fund, like passages for water, or in case of severe drought is present, then of course some derogation can be given. And then Article 109, this is, let's say, the most common felony, and it regulates the type of tree theft. And the material object is wood products as defined by Article 58, paragraph 2. So the material element of the felony is taking the wood from the owner without the right to do it. Either it's whole trees or partial trees. This everything that is, let's say, wood material that is taken outside the forest goes into this Article 109. Then we have another article besides this. It's Article 30, paragraph 1, which states that obligation of artificial regeneration and helping of natural regeneration, this shall be done in maximum 2 vegetation seasons. So exactly, if a clear cut or a windstorm happens, the maximum is 2 vegetation seasons. After that, of course, controls will happen, and the owner of or the administrator will be fined. And I was mentioning before that in the penal code, there are 2 amendments that before they were introduced in the forest code from 2018, but then in 2015, they were passed in the text of the penal code. And this is about forgery and usage of marking devices. This is stipulated at Article 317 and 318. So in the case of forgery, it's from 3 months to 1 year or fine. And of course, if you use these forged devices, then it's 3 months to 3 years or fine. So I would say that the legislation is quite up to date, and every aspect can be investigated by authorities, by institutions that have these control abilities. Okay, so as I was mentioning before, I wanted to highlight a little bit also on the traceability, because it's a hot topic today. We have also an infringement about illegal logging. So not deforestation, but they are saying, so in the letter from the EU, it's about illegal logging. So for traceability, we have this government decree 497 from 2020, and of course, in there it's regulated also the usage of SUMAL 2.0, the upgrade from SUMAL 1.0. And it's stated that at Article 4, paragraph 12, SUMAL 2.0 system is the basis for the own due diligence system of forest owners, forest administrators, forest management units, economic operators that are using SUMAL 2.0, according to the requirements of the Article 4, paragraph 3 of the Regulation 995/2010. So this is the European Union timber regulation. So as we can see also on the left side of the image, this application is used by every, let's say, actor that is having business in the field of forestry or in the field of administration. And of course, it is used by the control organism for a better overview. I don't know if we will have time at the end to present a little bit the features on the website version. We will see. So this was, let's say, a little bit of introduction in the main forest laws since the beginning of implementation of the first forest code to the actual forest codes. I didn't want to go deeper in some aspects because for sure this can be done on other occasion, and it can be focused solely on those aspects. But as I said, as a general overview for somebody who doesn't know a little bit what happened here, and I think it's quite good. And let's say after all of these years of legislation in Romania, I made just a second, a short, let's say, print screens from the Eurostat. And as we can see that the change in forest area from 1990 to 2020. So after 89 in Romania, the forest surface increased with almost 10%, as they are stating. And then the share of forest in the total country area is, let's say, roughly 40%. Which is still a good thing, as I said, after all this legislation that appeared in the last years. Then another aspect is the growing stock of timber in European Union forest. And as we can see that Romania has a growing stock of almost 20% since the year of 2000. And the share of the total use tax from Romania is about 8%, 9%. The greatest growing stock can be found in Ireland, and of course the lowest in Sweden, of course also due to climate condition of the country. And then also a very important aspect is the share of removal of net increment in European Union forest. Perhaps some people will say that, yeah, in Romania we cut more than is growing and so on. But as a matter of fact, if we see this graphic, the average for the European Union, the annual increment for the European Union is 63%. Of the increment was removed by the logging industry, let's say in 2009, as it is stated here. We have removals in 3 countries that exceeded 90% of the net increment. That is Czech Republic. As you can know, so in Czech Republic it's 111. But as you can know, it was the forest from there, it was affected by bark beetle, it was affected by windfalls. So then, of course, the value is so high. And then the Netherlands is extracting 96% of the increment, and Germany 94%. If we look at the end of the figure, we can see Romania that is at the rate of 30%, yeah, of the commercialized wood. So that means 70% of the increment still remains in the forest, accumulating also the stocks. And as I said, during these times, the legislation developed, having a lot of directions, from nature conservation to implementation of criminalizing the felonies that are happening in the National Forest Fund. And this, the surface increased. Of course, the growing stock increased after 1989. So this would be, let's say, the main ideas that I wanted to present to you this evening. I hope they were also interesting for you. And if you have, I don't know, questions, perhaps Mihai can tell us if there were some questions during the presentation.
Thank you very much, Andrei, for your wonderful presentation. Broad and brief in the same time, in my opinion. You managed to highlight the most important thing from legal point of view, from my point of view. I suggest you also to have also a short presentation of Inspector Pădurii, so the forest inspector. But
okay.
Until then, I want to highlight at least 2 very important things from my point of view. You mentioned that in 1954, we had the first, let's say, regulatory act that divided the forest into production and protected forest. So we were in the first, one of the first countries across Europe and also across worldwide. And this is what we managed to do, let's say, 70 years ago, and we are continuing to do it in this way. Also, in that year, 1953, 1954, all of our forest had a forest management plan that is of great interest nowadays at European level, because, for example, within the European Forest Strategy is mentioned to have close to nature forestry treatment, or to have long-term forest planning. And this is what we are doing for at least 70 years or even more in some specific regions across Romania. And the second most important thing, in my opinion, you mentioned that regarding the controls, especially the wood transport on public roads, there are also several other authorities, such as police and gendarmerie, who are taking care of these transports. And there is now a question on our Facebook page. It's in Romanian, but I will translate it in English. What is your opinion about the forestry, differentiated forestry regime, mainly state versus private owned. If you allow me, I may say that it's the same forestry regime, even if you are a private or a state-owned forest, even if you have a private or a state-owned forest. So you have to deal with the same rules, you have to apply the same treatments and so on. So Andrei, if you could please share now the page on the website of the Inspectorul.
Okay, so I will just stop share the presentation, I think, no?
Yes.
In order to share the website.
Until then, I want to mention that this initiative started 6 years ago. So the first version of Forest Inspector is available since 6 years ago. And nowadays, there are several publicly available information regarding the harvesting points, regarding the transports. But I will give the floor to Andrei. Andrei, please.
Exactly. So as we can see here, Sumal 2.0 has, of course, a lot of functions for the control institution, but it has also some features that are available for the public. And regarding traceability, my opinion is that you have live information on what's happening in all of Romania. And of course, there are a lot of people concerned regarding the illegal harvesting, and they have a great tool now to check if these aspects are true or not. And of course, Inspectorul Pădurii has several layers. I will start with the colors first. So the orange one is log yards, where delivery notes are initiated to other companies or beneficiaries. And then if we, so let's go a little bit deeper. So like this point, yeah, we can see it that it's a log yard delivery note. Then if we see a red dot, then this means that it's a delivery note issued from the forest. And of course, there are some extra community delivery notes which are not so common in Romania. And in case there is a green dot, then it may happen that something happened, perhaps a broken truck, and then the forest management unit came, assessed the situation, and due to the fact that perhaps the time frame of delivery of the initial delivery note expired, they issue another one, so that wood can continue its route to the final destination. Of course, we can then go a little bit deeper on this aspect. For example, we can go, let's say, near Bucharest or somewhere, and then we can see that this red dot is overlapping a forest area. And then if we click it, we can see the codes, the online codes that were given for those transports from the forest to beneficiaries. And if we further click on this, we can have the information like the number of the origin of the wood, so to say it, with the so-called APV and harvesting permit. Then we can have the issue date, the availability of the avis. So of course the wood has to be transported inside this availability frame. And then we can see who, let's say, made the delivery note. In this case, it's an FMU. And then, of course, we can see also the volume. And also pictures. But just a second to search one also with pictures. Okay, so in some cases, if, for example, a person from the village wants to buy some firewood and comes with his horse, of course, or with a tractor, let's say the tractor and trailer, of course, sometimes there will be no need of pictures. But anyhow, as I said, we have the origin of the wood, the time, the availability, the volume, and then transport pictures. In this way, also the control organisms can see if the volume stated here is corresponding with the pictures that were taken when the wood started to move. Because of course, if you want to transport wood, you have to have this online code. And another feature is the route of the transport. This will be public, of course, after 24 hours because of the GDPR reason, and it will stay there for another 72 hours. So regarding traceability, we can search or we can look for every delivery note that is issued in Romania with logs from the forest, from log yards and so on. So this would be on the, let's say, transport side. And then we have the second layer where it stated data about the origin of the wood. It will take a little bit of time because there is a lot of data on the portal, so it takes some time for loading. And of course, here we have again different colors, and let's say the color is representing the status. For example, this blue one means that it was handed to the company and the harvesting can take place. For example, if I will click this blue dot here, we can see the number of the APV, which was automatically issued by SUMAL. And then we can see the FMU that issued this APV. And then we have further information about the production unit, the compartment, the region or the region from where it is, the volume, of course, that is marked, the type of the cut. So it's main cut, secondary cut, depends on the forest, and then the, let's say, availability of the harvesting permit, because as you can see, also in the legislation, we have periods with restrictions. So then the company, for example, can start the harvesting for a couple of months and they have to stop because otherwise the vegetation season would start. And of course, if you are doing harvesting in main cuts, you can damage the seedlings and so on. And then we have this further information about the company who is doing the harvesting and the number of the harvesting permit. Besides this, we can see the places where the wood concentrates or where the wood is extracted from the forest to those places, because from those places they will be loaded into trucks and then delivered to customers. So exactly these features are public and assures greater traceability of let's say the forest regime that is applied in Romania. Besides this, we have this management plan maps, and we can see, of course, not all information is public because but if we click, for example, on a certain production unit, we can see the number, we can see the surface, and a lot of let's say data that are from the management plan. So from the description of that parcel. So this is also a nice feature to see exactly more information of that let's say forest surface that you want to find more information. And then we have this the catalog. Of course, it's implemented here, the virgin and quasi-virgin forest catalog, where you can see all the surfaces. I think there are roughly 50,000 hectares, I think.
70,000 hectares.
70,000 hectares at this moment. And of course, all of them can be found here. And of course, is in those places logging in virgin forest logging is prohibited. And then we have also the protected areas, starting from Natura 2000 to national parks and natural parks reservation into the map, where of course we can or the public can search for further data. As you can see, it's quite user friendly. You just click on it, and then it's stipulating the code. For example, this is Roșci 0194, the ministry order that approve it, and the type of the site, if it's community importance or national importance. So I would say that this information is made publicly is a very good point for traceability, and also for a better overview for those who are, let's say, eager to see what's happened in Romania's forest. Of course, it needs, so in order to assess or to let's say analyze this information, you need to have a little bit of degree of understanding what's happening there, a little bit of the supply chain, how the FMUs are doing, because for sure we saw a lot of news saying this and that, also on illegal harvesting, but in reality, let's say they didn't check, or they didn't know how to check it, and they just see something and then they communicate this. So as I said, it's very good information. If you have basic knowledge on these things, what's happening also in the FMU side, in the forest side, harvesting side, you can analyze all the data that is provided in Inspectorul Pădurii. So I am confident that in the future further developments will happen, and as I said, it's great to see all this made public. I don't know if there is other country that has this information publicly.
Neither do I. I think we are the only country across Europe who has this publicly available system. And I want to add, Andrei, also that this instrument, let's say, is available also on our mobiles, on our phone mobiles. So there is a specific application called Inspectorul Pădurii that can be downloaded and installed on our phones, and we can, all of us can check on our public roads if the transport is legal or illegal, and if the transport is not in the systems, there is a high possibility to be an illegal transport. So you should call 112 and to get in contact with the police, for example. Yes, it's a very complicated but very useful instrument, also from my point of view, with a high degree of transparency. A lot of information is available well, starting from the ones that are included in the forest management plans, continue with the harvesting points, the harvesting permits, and also the transport documentation. So we have all the cycle, let's say. So, Andrei, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I give the floor now to Marin because I know that he has at least one question. Marin, please.
Invitation.
Thank you. Starting with what Mihai said before your presentation with the forest inspector, Sumal 20, and more than this, after that, I want to ask you if you can make a parallel between Romanian regulations, the one that you presented here live on our page, and European ones, but in terms of, I don't know, innovations, as Mihai said. So how innovative were our regulations comparing with those in Europe? Or if we can find the balance between tradition, what was the reality of our forest, and how much the European laws influenced us, at least in the last century and a half.
Yeah, so regarding the novelty part, I would say going online with every operation that is happening in the forest sector is the best tool, because as I said, you have all the information on the servers, control organism can cross-check it from the stump to the FMU and to the customers. And as also Mihai mentioned, I don't have the information that in other parts of, let's say, European Union or other countries from European Union this will happen. Of course, there are some systems implemented in other countries, but they don't have this degree of automatization as we have. So yeah, who knows, perhaps in the future this let's say regulations will inspire them to do something similar in their countries. And of course, yeah, since we are in the European Union, we have also regulation to apply in our country, like the European Union Timber Regulation. And of course, this led to some changes, which were good changes in the last years due to this. And for sure, we had applied since 2007, the year of entering the European Union, some directives from those one. But anyway, as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have a lot of influence from the German forestry, French forestry, like the first code that had a lot of aspects taken also from the French code. So anyhow, in time, there were a lot of influences from the things that were happening in, let's say, Germany, France, Russia, regarding the forestry side. So we had taken them in the past. Now we are taking also on the regulation that are made regarding forest in the European Union. So, as I said, we are, let's say, we are having the legislation up to date. I consider we have it. For sure, improvement or other aspects can be added because technology evolves, but of course this will happen in time. Who knows? Perhaps what the future will predict. As I said, regarding technology, if let's say we have internet access in every valley of the forest, we can use some devices, and who knows, take data, take volumes, measure the wood live, or.
Thank you. I was thinking during your entire presentations of how interesting it would be to have a conference that has as a main theme how people reacted across time to all forestry regulations. So my next and last question would be, to your knowledge, how people reacted in time to these forest regulations, from forest owners to foresters to people to, I don't know, people involved in politics, how these different categories reacted to all these laws and regulations that, if we go back in time, really influenced their lives, probably more than now.
Yeah, so as I said, I think human beings are always reacting to something new. It doesn't matter if it's a law in forestry or if it's a law for public road traffic. The first thing is something new, and they don't know how to deal with it. What can I say is that in the past, laws also, let's say, adapted to the people, because also in the 19th century, some special laws were given for the people, for the poor people, in order to have access to firewood, to have access to construction wood. So yes, there were times that the laws were done also for the people, to help them, let's say, survive. But then, of course, laws were also made to protect and to conservate the let's say, richness of the nature. And of course, perhaps it's a little bit hard at the beginning, but as I was also mentioning about the first forest code after 1989 and 2008, is that yes, you can make a lot of, let's say, amendments to protect the nature, but you also have to give some subsidies to the forest owner, because if you don't give them, they will think it's my land, I have it since 4 or 5 generations, and I'm using it for let's say, feeding my family. But of course, if we go, and it's very good that we go in this direction of nature conservation, but in order that the people will let's say, react, you need this payment in ecosystem services that are happening all over Europe. So then it will be no problem. So I don't know if I answered a little bit on the last question.
Andrei, if you allow me, I want to add that, in my opinion, for example, it would be the best to find the balance between, let's say, wood industry and biodiversity protection. This is our greatest challenge from my point of view. So thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I'm happy that I found also some new information, so I'm very, very happy with this. And Andrei, please consider yourself as a, let's say, best friend of our activities, and we invite you also to have this presentation in Romanian language, also for our colleagues, in order to debate it deeperly debate it. So once again, thank you very much for your time and for your wonderful presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you also.
Have a wonderful night, all of you. Bye-bye.
All the best.